After the then mixed response to On Her Majesty's Secret Service and George Lazenby's decision not to return to the franchise, Eon opted to bring back Sean Connery as James Bond. However, Sean Connery had to be persuaded to return. It's no secret that he was completely done with the franchise when he originally left. As a result, Connery was paid around $1.25 million, which at the time was a record for a Bond actor's salary. This at the time huge salary really cut into the budget for Diamonds Are Forever, and it really shows up on screen. The film just has a very cheap, tacky look to it, and the reason behind this is very clear. Connery did not want to return after Diamonds Are Forever, and while he wouldn't return to the Eon Bond universe, he would one day appear in an unofficial outing, but more about that another time. Another search was on for a new Bond. Numerous actors were considered, including Jeremy Brett, who is best remembered for playing Sherlock Holmes in the ITV series of the same name from 1984 to 1994. In 1971, in the same year Diamonds Are Forever was released, he was already a well-known and high-profile actor in the UK. He had appeared in several theatre productions. In 1961, he appeared in a stage production of Hamlet. Ultimately, Brett was not chosen for the role. And while Roger Moore was fantastic in the role, it is interesting to think about what Jeremy Brett would have been like in the role. I think he would have been well suited to the role, although perhaps more of an actor suited to Q, but this is coming from someone who isn't especially well versed in the work of Jeremy Brett. So, Roger Moore was cast as James Bond, the third actor to play James Bond in the official Eon series. The first Moore film, Live and Let Die, was released in 1973. It was an attempt by the producers, I think, to reinvigorate the franchise, as they were worried at the time that audiences were starting to lose interest. Live and Let Die is one of the best received films in the franchise, and as if it needed saying, Roger Moore is absolutely fantastic in his debut as 007. Moore's second film, The Man with the Golden Gun, is regarded as one of the weakest outings in the Bond franchise. It had a messy production, with script rewrites taking place at the same time as the filming. The tone is a bit off as well. Perhaps at this stage the producers were still unsure whether the franchise was working post-Connery. But I suppose The Man with the Golden Gun can be thought of as a slightly awkward blip in the Moore era. Maybe it was rushed into production. It was released just 1 year after Live and Let Die. 3 years later, The Spy Who Loved Me was released. This is possibly the outing that set in stone the key Moore era elements. Everything is on point here. The humour, the action sequences, the story, and anything else. It's one of the best Bond movies and began a period of renewed confidence in the series. The tone is much lighter and sillier than in previous Bond eras, but it's not over the top, at least not yet. It has a charming quality to it. It's enjoyable and fun without becoming embarrassing. Moonraker continued this sort of tone when it was released in 1979. Moonraker divides opinion almost like no other Bond movie. You'll find those who love it and you'll find those who hate it. You may struggle to find someone who just thinks it's okay. For Your Eyes Only was the most serious Moore Bond movie, and while it's not without its humour, the Citroen 2CV chase sequence very much comes to mind. Overall, it is much more serious, and this is reflected in Roger Moore's performance. He could do suave and charismatic in the lighter outings, but when required, he could add a degree of intensity and drama to his performance. But with the next film, the tone becomes lighter once again with 1983's Octopussy. However, everything starts to become a little bit cornier here. Bond spends a significant chunk of the movie dressed up as a clown, for example. Roger Moore was also 56 in the year Octopussy was released, and probably 55 when it was filmed. And while his performance is still great, his age really does tell you that this isn't supposed to be taken seriously. Maybe the later Moore outings aren't supposed to be down-to-earth spy movies. It's more likely that they're just a fun way to kill a couple of hours, and why not? Moore's final James Bond movie was A View to a Kill, which was released in 1985, and it's just crap. That may sound a tad harsh, but I think it's the best word to describe the movie. It's silly, sure, but at this stage it's ramped too far, and it's just embarrassing to watch. The humour doesn't land, and the series just feels so tired and worn out. So, that concludes the Moore era in the 007 series. It was an era that spanned 12 years and 7 films, and has clearly left its mark on the franchise, and possibly modern cinema as a whole. It varied in terms of the tone, the style of storytelling, and the quality. The Moore era evolved more than any other Bond era, perhaps because it lasted so long and included 7 films. While this era doesn't quite reach the heights of the Connery era, it's still fantastic, and perhaps it's not entirely right to compare the two eras so heavily. Roger Moore is an on-screen delight as James Bond. His performance is utterly brilliant in every one of his Bond films. His character may not entirely stick to the version that Fleming created, but how important is that? Sure, if you're a hardcore Bond fan who's watched all the movies and read all the books, then maybe you'll take issue with the Moore Bond. But most people, I think Roger Moore was one of the best Bonds. He totally owned the role, although perhaps he may have stayed a tad too long. But what do you think of the Moore era? Let me know in the comments below.